to the field of qualifiers. A four-time winner and last year's Rookie of the Year. All three hope to improve on their last Speedway appearance. But for the defending IndyCar champion, it's been a disappointing month. All the highlights of day 2 of qualifications up next.
Speedway Today qualification report is sponsored by Lennox, Valvoline, Shell, Arby's, Pontiac, and by Osco.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to a special edition of Speedway Today. Qualifications Day 2. I'm Mark Patrick, along with the Indianapolis Stars' Robin Miller and our expert analyst, Derek Daly. And, Derek, what are your initial thoughts here today? A rather exciting last 20 minutes.
It was a great day, really. I mean, things get a bit quiet when you go to your second day, but I mean, you're right. The last 20 minutes makes up for a lot because you just don't know what's going to happen. And the last one of the day particularly electrified everybody here.
Well, things got started about 5:40, Robin, with your old buddy Gary Bettenhausen. We're calling him Mr. American Racing with all the foreigners on the soil this year.
Well, he's the one guy we can understand on the PA interviews, Mark. But it was good to see Gary get in because he had a good run going yesterday, and we're pretty sure he ran over a tire and chunked his right rear tire and sent him into the wall. But he came back strong like everybody probably figured he would.
220.381, and that leaves Gary in pretty good shape. He's in the 19th starting position, first position in row 7. After Gary, immediately, Jimmy Vasser came out onto the track. He had some trouble yesterday when he tried at a very hot time of day, but did extremely well today at a 2:18.967.
And Jimmy Vasser, you might remember, broke his leg very badly here during the race last year, so comes back on a confidence builder. This is another Dick Simon car. Now, Dick Simon has wrapped his arms around many drivers here very successfully, and Vasser was one of the recipients of that guidance this year and did very, very well in the Codilux car.
That opening day V was for Vasser, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. It was for Vasser. Good old Jimmy.
He's right next to Gary Bettenhausen in row 7. Now, following Vasser, we had Mark Smith, who has taken the low speed to this date. Robin, are you surprised that he would accept a 2:14.356?
No, and I think it's smart, Mark, because they've got an identical car to this, and they've got all week to work with it. He's taking a chance that might be fast enough to make it. They might run into bad weather next week. It might be extremely hot, and he'd already be locked into the field. He wasn't running a whole lot faster today than 2:14, 2:15, so he took it.
And our final qualifier of the day, who got out 40 seconds before the track closed at 6 o'clock, Stéphane Gregoire.
This was a great run. They waved off at 2:17 yesterday, went out this morning, did 2 laps and blew up their Buick engine, put another one in, only managed 2 more laps when they had to pull the engine out again to fix a faulty clutch. But it was a spectacular run at the end, and in fact, I believe he ended up fastest of the day.
Right. Fastest rookie and fastest of the day.
Great run, great run.
Again, 2:20.851. Now, Dick Ray is standing by with Monrovia's favorite driver, a guy who's getting a lot of applause down here on pit road today, Gary Bettenhausen. Richard?
And a guy that's really been working hard way back during the months of February and March and April, trying to get the Lola Buick combination in the show. And boy, the weekend was really up and down for you, wasn't it, Gary?
It certainly was. Yesterday, I thought when the morning started, I thought, well, the crew and I will all be having a beer by about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And when I spun on my qualifying attempt on the last lap and banged the wall, that changed all that. Guys worked their hearts off, got out and got the thing back on the racetrack late yesterday afternoon. And then this afternoon, or about 1 or 2 o'clock, I blew the qualifying engine up, and they had to change engines. So we got out just right about an hour and a half before the deadline, and I took 4 laps and said, put it in line. I think I can do it.
We saw you earlier this afternoon, and you were not one happy camper.
No, I was uptight, and I still hadn't figured out why I spun yesterday, because the car had a big understeer in it for the first 3 laps of my qualifying run. And all of a sudden on the 4th lap, I eased up just a little bit going into turn 2 because I didn't want to brush the wall, and the car swapped ends on me. And today I found out several people said that something cut the right rear tire and it blew.
You think you made a pretty good significant gain as to what some of those problems were, and you're back in the game now?
Yes, we made big gain right, I'd say, in the last 15 minutes before qualifying. We found something that was so simple that we'd overlooked it right up to that point.
Okay, so that may be good news then for Jeff Brabham as he tries to get the third Team Menard car in the show next weekend. Mark, let's send it back to you.
All right, thanks very much, Dick. Good to see Gary B back at the field. Let's take a look now at the starting field so far for the 77th running of the Indianapolis 500. Obviously, Lyondike, Andretti, and Boiselle in row 1. Row 2, Scott Goodyear, Alonzer Jr., and Stefan Johansson, who you didn't really get to say as much about him yesterday as you wanted to, Derek.
Well, Stefan, I think, did a great job here. The interesting thing that you must pull out of this run is he's in a privately run Penske car run by Tony Bettenhausen, and they ran over the Penske factory cars here. So Stefan Johansson, I think, did a great job. Very pleasing for Tony B.
And Tony Bettenhausen also put the MX car in the field today at 2:18.034. He's in row 8. Row 3, Paul Tracy, Nigel Mansell, and Emerson Fittipaldi in row 4. Roberto Guerrero, Scott Brayton, and Danny Sullivan in row 5. Robin's best new friend, Nelson Piquet, Kevin Kogan, and Scott Pruitt. And Kogan and Pruitt are a couple of interesting guys that have had rides in this type of range for the last several years.
Well, the thing that's really interesting about Pruitt, Mark, is he comes back in a 91 Lola and qualifies at 2:16.7, and the car he was in last year, Bobby Rahal's car, Rahal's only able to make it run just a little bit faster with an average of 2:17.140. This has to make Pruitt feel very good because a lot of the onus was on him last year when, in fact, the car was not capable. Scott's a good race driver.
And Rahal's been pretty outspoken about what that car could have done if he'd been driving it last year.
And well, and Bobby knows it needs a lot of development, and that's why they hired Mike Groff. They're doing a lot of development. But Scott did a real good job.
Row 6, Stefan Gregoire, Jeff Andretti, and Teo Fabi. And Jeff Andretti slides in today.
How did you learn how to pronounce Stefan Gregoire just like that?
Because
Robin Miller can't speak European like that.
No. I spent 4 years in Muncie, Indiana, learning how to talk at Ball State. Gary Bettenhausen, Jimmy Vasser, and Stan Fox gets it in the field. Car number 91 at 2:18.765. Row 8. How about Lynn St. James today, Derek?
Great run for Lynn. There was an unusual situation this morning where Raoul Boesel jumped into that car and brought it straight up to 222 miles an hour. Lynn got back in and did 222 because she said she had the confidence that she knew the car was capable of the speed, so she got over that mental barrier of pushing just that little bit harder. One of the advantages of having a good, fast, knowledgeable teammate.
All right, now, when we come back, we're going to show you 3 incidents that happened here at the Motor Speedway today. Luckily, none serious, but all, as always, interesting when Speedway Today Special Edition Qualifying Day 2. We're back on this special edition of Speedway Today, Qualifying Day 2, and there were 3 separate incidents today, the very first of which was John Paul Jr., who really fought this one and stayed fortunate, Derek.
We have seen this so many times this month that people get away with full 360 spins, and John Paul here, he got a little bit high here. See it? Car gets away from him, but he stays off the wall. He could have done $200,000 worth of damage right there.
He's got a 220-mile-an-hour lawnmower as he gets into the new grass here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And as Derek said, Robin, I never have remembered as many cars that spun and didn't get any concrete.
Well, this is what Tony George and Kevin Forbes were hoping for, Mark, when they put the rumble strips in, making the radius of the turn tighter and making the entrance to the turn higher. They were hoping to get rid of these, severe contacts like they had last year. And so far, knock on wood, it's been really good because of the 2 hard contacts that come away with a concussion and a bruised thigh is all.
JP got back out into the car later in the afternoon. So too did Buddy Lazier after this accident today.
And you can see here the car is on fire, and now it erupts, of course, as soon as it stops because there's no wind going by the car, pulling the flame out the back. Buddy was lucky to get out of this unscathed himself, but there was quite a bit of damage done. This is a Buick engined car that he brought here today, and he ran 213 miles an hour after about 12 laps, but unfortunately didn't get a chance to qualify.
Yeah, he looked for a long time like he wasn't aware of the severity of the fire that was in there, and it obviously must have been some oil since you could see flames.
That's right, and remember, this is Buddy Lazier and his dad's own car, so their investment is on fire right there. Right.
Dad gave him the keys. Now, just before the close of the track, Davy Jones and the great job by the crews to get this cleaned up when he blew this engine to allow Stefan Gregoire to get his qualifying in.
Not to mention a great job of Davy Jones keeping the thing off the wall with the oil pouring out of that thing on the tires.
Until this incident right here at the end of it. What happened was the engine blew up and the hot fluids from the engine came down through the side pod into the car. Davy was into Davy's seat. He knew he had to jump, but he couldn't quite get it stopped in time. He popped the steering wheel, and of course, because these cars are set up with stagger and tilt, it turned left immediately.
Yeah.
And as soon as those engines go, the bottom of the compartment starts to fill with oil, and that's why you always see the drivers wiping the bottom of their seat. Now, Vince Welch is standing by with yet another great story from today, one that's been a struggle all month long. Vince is in Gasoline Alley with us live now.
Thanks very much, Mark. Before we do that, I got a couple of guys with me here that had pretty successful days. Jeff Andretti here on my right and Jimmy Vasser on my left. Jeff had the quickest speed of the day as far as today's qualifiers were concerned until Gregoire got out there, and I know that you had to be a little disappointed. You didn't have the quickest speed, but still over 220, and I know you got to be thrilled about that.
Oh yeah, we're very thrilled. You know, it would have been nice to have quick time for today, but you know, Stefan did a real good job, and you know, nothing I could say. I mean, he drove well, and you know, I'm very happy with my speed.
It's amazing at all that you are back here after the injuries you suffered during the race last year. How has the comeback been for you, Jeff?
It's been a lot of hard work to get me, you know, get back, and you know, but it's certainly paying off all the work that I've done, because I certainly feel really good.
Now, you and Jimmy were just comparing aches and pain feelings. How are you physically? Is it still, are you still ailing a bit or not?
Physically, I feel good. I can certainly predict the weather a lot better.
The arthritis lets you know when it's going to rain. Hopefully, we're not going to have any of that. Jimmy Vasser in the middle of row 7, and we were talking just a moment ago, and just getting in the field is the biggest battle, and now you can kind of kick back a little bit and work towards getting in the race.
Yeah, it's a big relief to be in the field. Last year we went through kind of insufficient qualifying speed, jitters the whole last week and final weekend of qualifying. It feels good to be in the field solid, but it's not too much kickback. We don't have a real good car right now. I think we got a lot of work to do for a race car.
Now, what do you do this week? Do you concentrate on the setup? Obviously, the weather can change a great deal between now and race day.
Yeah, well, I think you have to try to run in all the different conditions that the week is going to offer you, because race day you're not real sure what it's going to be, and you know, I think that if it's at all possible to find some kind of another half a lane or even an extra lane out there, you know, it's really a one-groove track now, but you know, I think it's going to be real important to try to get a good race car behind other cars, and my car isn't like that now, and we got a lot of work to do.
Jimmy Vasser and Jeff Andretti, two guys that got into the field today for the 77th running of the Indianapolis 500, and certainly wish both of you the best of luck, and we'll keep a close tab on their progress here as the next week progresses and as we near closer to race day. Mark?
All right, Vince, thanks very much. We're going to take a break and come back with more of this special edition of Speedway Today. Qualifying day 2, 11 more added to the field. Back live at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and today is not only day 2 of qualifying for the 77th running of the 500, but also picture day for the front row, the one Scott Goodyear wanted to be in so badly yesterday and was just bumped out of at the last minute. And let's take a look now at how that went. Derek, this was great when you were at the Speedway, because it was something that you never had to worry about.
Front row picture?
Yeah.
No, but I did go to the back row party.
That's
one
right.
time. Remember that, Robin?
That's the greatest party in May, Derek, the last row party, because that's the real nitty-gritty of auto racing.
Still have my T-shirt.
That's right.
Now, a guy who's generally in the front row, it's almost a given there as we watch Ari Leyendijk and the others in row number 1, Raul Boisel there, Mario Andretti between them. Guy who's generally there, or at least a threat to be, is Bobby Rahal. This year, he is the next to last qualifier so far in the 25th position in the field. Robin, we talked about the different car. He's got the Rahal Hogan type of car this year, their own design. And it's just really been a struggle.
And they have tested and tested and tested with it. It just was not a very fast car in oval last year. They had one moment at Michigan last year when John Dick was hired by Scott Pruitt out of his own pocket to run. They got going pretty well, but most of the time it was a tough car to make go fast.
They're concentrating more of their time on their new car. Now, it was to be ready in June. It will not be ready now until August, but the key to it is he probably will have a Honda engine in that car next year. That's what they're waiting for, really.
And he gets the dealership.
He already had that.
All right, Vince Welch has the story of Bobby Rahal today at the Speedway.
The flu bug kept Rahal out of the car earlier in the week, but when Bobby returned, the handling problems stayed. They were typified today. Rahal ran his quickest lap, 2:21. It came during the cool morning practice session, but during Rahal's afternoon qualification run, the setup problems returned.
You know, when it's cool and cloudy, the car really responds, drives like a car I like. When the sun comes out, which it managed to do just in time for our qualifying run, it really pushes like crazy.
You know, I thought at the beginning of the week we'd find something that would help us, and we've been struggling, and we haven't yet, and you know, hopefully we will when we start setting up for the race.
With crossed fingers, even his mother's wish of good luck couldn't help the 1986 winner. In his second attempt of the weekend, Rahal slowed on each lap for an average speed of 2:17.140.
We've been fighting it all week, and we obviously have some more work to do. I think 17.1 will make the show, but we obviously have some work to do yet.
I think it's time for us to get out of here for a couple of days and start over. So, you know, we'll try to set the car up for the race and do the best we can.
Two driver owners are in the show today. Bobby Rahal, who you just saw there, the other Tony Bentonhausen in the Amex car, and he hadn't had very many laps in that.
No, he had about 50 hot laps, Mark. I think a total of 101 laps altogether. Tony missed the race last year in a year-old car and came back this year with a 93 Penske, and he ran very strong, and he always did very well here. This was the one track Tony always did a good job of qualifying, and he's so fired up about Stefan Johansson being on the outside of the second row, and the fact that they out-qualified Team Penske with that car. They've had a great month already.
All right, more to come from the Speedway, including an entire look at the starting field so far for the 77th running of the Indianapolis 500. Stay with us. We're back at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway live from pit row on this special edition of Speedway today. And a couple of guys we haven't talked about yet that have qualified. Al Unser Sr. later in the day, and also Teo Fabi, a former pole sitter.
And exactly, 1983, he came here and rocked the place with, I believe, a speed of 207 miles an hour. Stayed for a couple of years, went back to Formula One, came back to Indy cars, went back to World Championship sports car racing, and now, of course, is back with Jim Hall. Struggled a lot throughout this week. Couldn't get this car over 220 miles an hour. Eventually got 222, and finally put it in the field at just over 220, so a good run for him.
And Robin, another guy who's certainly familiar with the pole position, Al Unser Sr. gets it in the field today, and he's one of the last icons. He's the first guy that came to my mind yesterday when A.J. finally retired, and I asked Al Jr. if he had thought about his dad at all, and he goes, no, my dad's so much younger than A.J., I don't even have that go through my mind.
Al has never been much of a qualifier, and he's the first one to admit it. He just wants to get in the show, and if the car feels decent, he sorts it out as it goes on. And when the green flag drops, he's the guy you have to keep an eye on because he's such a savvy, smart race driver, and especially in a 200-lap race like this one.
And with three cars, it's difficult to run them all the time every day. So what they tried to do was run Guerrero, let him get the setup, and then bolt that setup onto the other two cars of Crawford and Al Unser. It didn't work because Crawford in particular did not like the setup that Guerrero finally found and liked. So Al Unser Sr. and Crawford ran very little and had to go their own way at the end of the week.
Let's look at the starting field again for this running of the Indianapolis 500. And you know, Jim Crawford has been less than pleased so far with what's been going on with his teammates.
And I think mainly because of his lack of lap time. But you see row one here, Ari Leyendijk, Mario, and Bozel from Brazil.
How about Raul Boesel? Is he going to be familiar enough with this type of racing to be a contender?
Absolutely. Now, he's had to skip backwards and forwards, too. Went out of it for a couple of years, went back to Brazil with his briefcase in his hand, pounded the streets, and came back with Sadia, which is a food company in Brazil, to finance his racing with Dick Simon. So I'm very pleased to see him so well up here.
Paul Tracy, Nigel Mansell, and Emerson Fittipaldi. Were you guys disappointed at all in Tracy's qualifying time of 2:22.98 yesterday after he's been so strong all week?
I don't think so. And after, remember the big crash he had here last year? And I mean, he has a propensity to fly off the road quite regularly. But I think on race day, if you're anywhere in the top 3 or 4, you are in contention. And just remember Phoenix. I always think that is a prelude to what goes on here in May.
I do too. I think the Penske's the best chassis here. This row here is the orthopedic Terry Trammell row of P.K. Cogan and Scott Pruitt, one of my favorites because these guys all battled back from big injuries.
There's more hardware in the bones in that row than there is in the racing cars.
And John Madden, by the way, just got the sponsorship of that entire row for hardware.
True value.
Gary Bettenhausen, Jimmy Vasser, And Stan Fox, one of your favorite drivers, because he comes off the old road track.
Used to race midgets with Stan Fox, and he's got a 2-year-old Lola and did a fine job this morning.
Lynn St. James, Tony Bentonhausen, and as we mentioned, Al Unser in the Budweiser King Racing number 80 puts it in the field at 2:17.453. Are we going to see Mark Smith at that last row party?
I would imagine he may or may not get bumped, but either way, he's probably going to have a shot at. We'll invite him anyway because it's such a fun deal. But do you realize there's never been a Smith in the Indy 500?
He's the very first one. That's amazing. A lot of Joneses. And we saw one just a couple of seconds ago, Parnelli Jones.
That's right.
Just over with some of the pace cars. They were taping a promotional spot for the Chevrolet dealership.
How many Dailies have been in the race? Just one?
One.
That's right.
One, yeah.
You're familiar with him.
Yeah,
Yes,
luckily we don't get into mayors of Chicago. Thanks as always, fellas, for being on the program. Derek Daly, Robin Miller. We'll see you tonight on Sports Locker and see you throughout the week with Speedway Today here on Wish TV. Have a great night.